City of Stevens Point Police and Fire Commission meeting, recorded March 1st, 2022.
Okay, I have 10 o'clock, so we're going to call the Police and Fire Commission to order. It's March 1st, 2022. First thing we'll do is have Leanne please call the roll.
Moore.
Here.
Rozek. Here. Ostrowski.
Here.
Taylor.
Here.
Mr. Kirschling is excused today. Second on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Should have them in your packet that Leanne provided. If you have any questions, comments.
Mr. President, I would move that we accept the minutes as submitted. I would second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Ostrowski and a second by Mr. Taylor to approve the minutes. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to agenda item number 3, which is the confirmation of bills. Mr. Ostrowski.
In looking the bills over, I don't see anything that jumps out at me, but I would like to point out for the sake of our newer members of the commission that there's, this time of the year, there's a heavy bill paying in the uniform area, and that is common. They kind of dish it out at the first part of the year, so just so that you're aware of it. But with that in mind, I do not see anything else that jumps out at me, so I would move to accept the bills as submitted.
Okay.
Second by Morozek.
Well, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments about the bills? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. That is it for the confirmation of the bills. Moving on to item number 4. Presentation by Lieutenant Joe Johnson on the use of force.
I'm going to prep this. Lieutenant Joe Johnson is one of our defense and arrest tactics. He's been in that role for several years. And a couple years back, we started to create master instructors in particular disciplines within the police department. One of those is use of force. Joe, that form that he is handing out is a form whenever we have a use of force incident within the police department, an officer is required to fill that form out along with a report. We had one prior to this that was reporting use of force, but not into the detail that we have now. That was something Joe brought back from one of his trainings that he has gone to. He has since expanded this program to what we see now. In a Police and Fire Commission report, every use of force that we have at the PD is, and I'm probably taking some of your stuff, so, is reported on that form. It goes to Lieutenant Johnson, and he'll explain to you what he does with that, but he ends up writing a narrative, and that narrative finds its way into the police report. So although it looks like I do all these great reportings, I just cut and paste what is given to me by the experts in the field, and that expert in this case is Lieutenant Joe Johnson. So, LT, it's yours.
Thanks, Chief. So like Chief Center said, he asked me to do a brief presentation on how we handle our use of force incidents here at the police department. Every department is different, but this is how we do it. I got a lot of my guidance from Madison PD, which is where I did most of my training, and I have a few mentors down there who are really involved with the use of force system or with our DAT system throughout the state. So I will get into how we report it and what goes through that, even though Chief Center said a little bit about it. But first off, I'm just going to kind of give you the basics on our use of force system. So generally, as a law enforcement officer, we encounter a multitude of incidents throughout the day. Most of those incidents are quite basic and ordinary, and everybody's voluntary and they comply with whatever it is that we're doing. However, sometimes we run into issues where we have to give verbal commands, we have to direct people's movements, we have to take people into custody. Our goal is to always get voluntary compliance if possible. However, some of our best officers, our most skilled officers, don't always get voluntary compliance. And sometimes we have to use physical force to achieve, control, and accomplish our legitimate law enforcement objective. In Wisconsin, most law enforcement agencies train defense and arrest tactics, which is what we train, also known as DAT, D-A-A-T, it's just an acronym, which is a system of verbalization skills coupled with physical alternatives. So always when we train DAT, we try to train, we tell them what we want them to do. If they don't do it, then we physically tell them what we want them to do. We try to put the two together. A use of force by definition is the amount of effort required by police to compel compliance by an unwilling subject. Certain things that limit our use of forces are controlled by the U.S. Constitution, by the Wisconsin law, agency policy, and then the officer's training. There's five times or types of incidents a police officer can generally use force. Those are outlined as to achieve and maintain control of resistive subjects, to detain a person reasonably suspected of criminal behavior, to make a lawful arrest, to defend themselves or others, and to prevent escape. Law enforcement officers cannot use force to punish, to retaliate against someone who has angered them or offended the officer, to teach the person a lesson, or to show them who's boss. The purpose of law enforcement officers' use of force is control. So then how do we report our use of forces? Every time an officer uses a use of force, they're required to type an officer report. That officer report obviously entails the entire incident, and then in the body of that report, they need to be very descriptive on the type of force that they've used. The type of force that they use goes along with this form that I handed out. So I'll just kind of break down that form for you guys so you can maybe better understand it. It's quite a simple form. It's more or less fill in the boxes type thing, and it's outlined in our policy, and on the back there's kind of a little cheat form that helps you type your report a little bit better. So if you see on the top, more or less incident information, date, time of call, where it happened, what officers were involved, and the type of call, and the case number. And then in the center of the front page, it goes along with the demographics of the individuals or the suspects that were involved in the use of force, their age, gender, race, and then weapons, if there are any weapons involved, how the call ended, whether there was an arrest or if it was a mental health call, and so on and so forth. And then contributing factors, early warning signs, which are things officers are trained to observe, whether the person was under the influence of drugs or alcohol, whether they were ignoring the officer, certain things like whether they stop moving or if they're looking at your weapon, different things that officers are trained to pick up on that they may have an issue down the road. And then obviously if there's any medical treatment because of the use of force, pre-attack postures, 1,000-yard glance, for those of you who don't know, is a person is just literally looking through you. They're not blinking, they're just looking through you, like beyond. They're not looking at anything, they just kind of have that glare over their eyes. That's usually a pretty good warning sign for us that they're probably not going to be a yes person. Shoulder shifts, sometimes they get in a boxer stance, things like that. They set, they lower their center of gravity, they get ready to fight. And then resistive behavior, any type of, this would be more or less when we make physical contact with the person. If we feel them tense their arm or they tense their muscles, they start talking back to us, swearing at us, and then obviously if they start fighting with us, their failure to follow our commands that we're giving them, whether they try to run from us or assault us, and then obviously other. And then the next part, which is kind of a little more graph type area, this more or less, this form covers up to 3 officers on the form, so if 1, 2, or 3 officers used force, each officer has their separate column that they would fill out, and so it's specific to each officer what type of force they use. We start our documentation at a compliance hold or a come along, which is any type of pressure that we apply to a person that could cause pain to get them to do what we want. So it's the very lowest form of force that we document. So that's where we start. And then we go down to decentralizations, takedowns. In the DAT terminology, it's known as passive countermeasures. Anytime we have to take somebody from a standing position to the ground or we put them up against a squad, there's certain techniques that we train. There's 4 of them specifically that the state trains for officers to do. Generally, those are modified because it can't always be textbook out in the field. And then taser display, all of our patrol officers carry a taser. You'd be surprised at how often when they remove that yellow taser from their duty belt that they get compliance almost immediately, because there's, whether they know or not how it feels, kind of people know that that's a taser and that's something I usually don't want to mess around with. And then taser deployment, obviously, if they didn't get the hint and then they end up shooting the person with the taser, a couple probes come out, hopefully they work and they stick into the person, and then they cause the neuromuscular incapacitation is what we call it, where it causes the person to not be able to control their body movements. They fall over, which then allows us to handcuff them, and take them into custody safely. OC spray, all officers have OC spray. We also use an OC display method where an officer can take out the OC, which is a small canister, and they shake it up. Some people know that OC is something you also don't want to mess with, so they take that out and say, if you don't comply with my orders, we're going to spray with OC. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, where then we have to use OC spray. Less lethal beanbag gun. We have a shotgun that we carry in our squads that shoots beanbags. It's orange. Sometimes on weapon calls where it's a knife or something similar to that, an officer will bring out the beanbag gun. And like I said, it's orange, so it sticks out. People usually recognize that. It's not a normal shotgun. So that we also use as a display and whether or not any rounds were fired. And then active countermeasures, which are all your strikes, your punches, your kicks, your elbows, knees. That's pretty rare that we use those, but that is something on here as well. And then a baton. Not every officer carries a baton. We don't require that by policy. However, they're all equipped with one, and it's their decision whether or not they want to wear it. The taser is kind of taken over for the baton. Baton's kind of an old school way of policing, a little more brutal. It doesn't look great either, and it has a potential to cause some pretty significant injuries, where a taser I think is a little bit safer. And then we have our firearm display and deadly force, which goes along with any call an officer removes their gun from their holster and the person that they're dealing with sees that is a display of force. So that's documented. And then obviously deadly force, which would be when an officer fires their weapon. Next category down below that is canines. Canines are a use of force, obviously. Anytime we display a canine and we threaten the use of the canine, we call that an active canine display. That's documentable for use of force. And then the canine bite, obviously, when they release the canine and it tries to bite the individual. The last section is emergency vehicle operation use of force, which covers anytime we try to use a pit maneuver, a pursuit intervention technique, we try to use road spikes, ramming, boxing, and road blocking and such. That's all documented on here as well. So, like Chief Center said, once an officer fills this form out and they type a report, that report goes to their immediate supervisor for review, and then it gets sent to me. I'm our lead for the use of force at our department. I review each use of force report, and then I would say most of the time I review the body camera as well, so that makes sure it jives with the report. And it's a little easier to see what's going on. Sometimes it's hard to really explain what the officers are seeing or hearing or experiencing, so when you watch that body cam, it kind of paints a better picture for you. So I review it, and I just kind of make sure that they're in line with policy, they're in line with the training. If anything sticks out, it's something I document. Maybe I can use it down the road for discussion, or we can use it for other training topics down the road as well to help us be a better department. And then I log it. So I have a spreadsheet where it more or less documents the date, the case number, what type of force was used, whether there was injuries to the officer or to the individual, and that's it. And I keep that for the year. Every month I give Chief Zenner the monthly summaries, kind of what happened. And then at the end of the year, I complete the end of year report, which I'm not sure, have they seen the end of year report yet? They haven't. I don't have a printout to hand out to everybody, but I can kind of discuss last year's end of year report if you want.
And this will be in the annual report.
Annual report.
Yeah, sure, just give us an overview.
Yeah, so just some numbers. It's a lot of numbers. So last year we had 80 use of force incidents, which is less than 1% of the calls we want, much less than 1%. I don't have a specific percentage because our how we document the calls we go on was a little goofy, where we used to have a case number for every call we went on. It was a lot easier to track. Last year we didn't. But it's less than 1%. We're well within the national average of the amount of use of forces we use to go on. That is 19 more use of force incidents than we had in 2020, and we kind of directly related that to the lack of calls we went on in 2020 because of COVID. And we were really shut down, both for the amount of activity we were requesting our officers to do and the amount of calls that we were getting. So if you, like I said, our use of force starts with compliance holds. We had 21 compliance holds. We had 26 takedowns, passive countermeasures. We had only one active countermeasure, so it was only one time a person struck an individual, whether it be a punch or an elbow or a knee. We did not use our OC at all in 2021. We displayed our tasers 11 times, and 5 of those 11 times, they deployed the probes on those tasers, but only 3 times were they effective. And we could talk for hours on why that is. We won't get into that. We displayed the beanbag gun a couple times. However, it was never used. It was never fired. And then for use of, emergency vehicle operations, officers used the pit maneuver one time, and they used road spikes one time. They were involved in several high-speed pursuits, but those are the only times that actual use of force was used. Our canine partners were used a fair amount. They did try to conduct one bite and were successful. However, the person was able to get away and continued on. We displayed our canines on 6 different occasions, which means the handler had the canine on leash and threatened to deploy the canine in certain situations. Officers drew their weapons on 42 of the 80 use of force incidents, which is about average with our numbers. That's 53% of the time a use of force incident involved an officer drawing their weapon, whereas the year prior we did it 59% of the time. Obviously, no rounds were ever fired in 2021, or as long as I've been reporting this. There were 5 officers injured of the 80 use of force incidents, which is about 6.3% of the time. All the injuries were pretty minor, scratches, hurt hip, person got exposed to spit in their face. None of the officers had serious injuries or resulted in long-lasting effects. And then of the 80 incidents, only 3 suspects were injured. 2 of them had minor scrapes, and a 3rd was bit by the canine, which was also ended up being a very minor injury. That's only 3.8% of our use of force incidents result in injury to the suspect. And I did no use of force reviews in 2021, and that's the last thing I can touch on. If an incident comes across my desk that, for say, the subject has a serious injury, or the officer has a serious injury, or the subject threatens to sue the department, or something along those lines, I could request to do a review, or I get requested by the assistant chiefs to do a review on it. And ultimately, all that is I take a closer look at the incident, I break it down step by step, and type up a report, and then hand that in to our administration for review. So that's all I got for you guys. Got any questions? I know I covered a lot of stats. Go ahead.
So what's our retention period on keeping these?
I've never gotten rid of any.
Okay.
I have them. I've been doing this, I believe, since 15 or 16. And usually it would be 7 years, probably, wouldn't it be, Chief, if we
7
were to throw
years.
some away?
Okay.
First
That's,
time.
yeah, that's good to
Yeah.
know, and I thought, yeah, the 7-year thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to touch too, a big job, and Joe's pretty good at this, is when he reads the report, if they're not up to standard, he's pretty quick to tune up that officer and make sure we got proper documentation.
Lieutenant, 2 things for you. One is, when you say drew a weapon in the report, that's anything, a baton, a...
No, draw their firearm, just their gun.
Just their firearm,
Yep, just the
okay.
gun. We use displays for taser, OC, and the beanbag gun. That's when those are the other displays. But
Okay.
the firearm draw, the weapon draw, that is specifically the gun.
Okay, and the other question I had was body cameras.
Yep,
Every patrol officer is wearing one now?
yep.
And it's strictly the patrol, right?
Well, we have, some of our IB guys wear cameras at certain times. Now, it doesn't really fit their job to have a camera belted on them all the time. I don't wear one. Generally, I sit behind a desk now. There's other officers in the department who don't wear them, but they're also not dealing with the public and handling calls.
Okay.
So,
Do we keep the body cam footage too along with this for that retention period?
So the body camera footage, Chief, you want to fill in a little bit on this?
Yeah, our body cam, we have a retention, state law is 120 days, unless obviously we got an investigation. And more times than not, when we have a use of force, there's an investigation that's associated with that. There's particular laws in retention, open records retentions, and legal requirements depending on the case. If we're talking a homicide, that's a lifelong records keep. Majority of the cases are required, I believe, 7 years or a particular time after that court case has been adjudicated. So to say what particular time frame we have, wouldn't really be able to do that. But what we end up doing is burning a CD. Actually, an interesting case. As we know, technology moves on and on and on. I can remember as a young officer, we had a homicide investigation in Stevens Point, and it actually garnered some national news just a couple of years ago. Well, back in the day, VHS was the big thing, and we had video. It doesn't keep. So unfortunately, that video no longer exists, unfortunately, but ultimately, to answer that question, it really depends. If we don't have a case associated with it, it's 120 days it stays on our server, and then it automatically goes away. It's deleted, so.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Very good report.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, very informative.
Okay, well, we're going to move on to item number 5, which is the approval of Officer Cody Stankowski to regular police officer status. Chief.
This one came up on us pretty quick. And normally, I would have a letter to present. I didn't get that letter from his supervisor in this case, but I had a verbal confirmation. He's done an outstanding job, and he had prior service before he got to Stevens Point. But his end of probation is officially March 21st. He is doing outstanding, and the recommendation is that we lift his probationary status.
Do you need a motion from us on this?
Yes.
Okay.
I motion that we remove Officer Cody Stankowski from probational status to full regular police officer status
As of,
as of today.
Today.
what is today? Okay.
March 1st.
March 1st.
All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Morozek.
We have a second by Morozic. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries. Approved.
All right.
Item number 6 is the police chief's report.
All right. And first, I apologize. Normally, I get this in the packet and sent to you. I was a little late this past month. We had quite a few things that popped up at the end of last week, and I wasn't able to get that out to you. Just wanted to touch a few things. Department squad changeover. We finally had this completed. This has been a lengthy delay. As you know, that was a capital from 2021. We had these squads, actually I want to say 2020, but we've had these squads sitting on our lot since February. Many things came into this delay, in particular, as we all know, several delays with aftermarkets and other products that we have, but we also had some difficulty with our local vendor. There's only a handful of vendors within the state that do squad wirings. There's obviously more technical aspect than just having our streets do that, but one particular vendor within the city we weren't getting satisfactory performance from. We were not alone. I had received calls from multiple agencies throughout the state. As I said, there's only a few out there. So we were fortunate. Officer Schultz and Lieutenant Williams did a search. We made contact with an individual that owns a business down in Poignette, I believe it is, and we were able to get our final 3 vehicles to them and the equipment, and they wrapped it up in about a month's time. So moving forward, unfortunately, we won't have a local vendor. We will be having a vendor in Poignette. So, but they're on the road. The other thing, and we've talked about that at the beginning, we did have another resignation from a crossing guard. We are struggling with this. We've had an open recruitment. It's just not a job that's very desirable with the time. Unfortunately, I believe it was a $2 raise that we had. Money is not, I don't believe, the deterrent here. It's literally the schedule. We have, throughout, I believe, the last 2 years, we've really limited, we've eliminated sites. It's a different world, too. If we would look back 10 years ago, we would, we had several kids that were going, walking to school. Some of these crossings, we have 1 or 2 students that are crossing, yet we need to have a crossing guard there. There's no further crossings that we can eliminate. We've cut the fat. We're down to the bottom line, and we are doing, hopefully we, I guess, fill the recruitment, but we've also looked at several different avenues. Lieutenant Johnson was looking at a private company. I did have some conversations, just very informal, with the school district of, looking at maybe some per credit. Not really confident on how that would work. Right now, the crossing we have our CSOs covering. That's obviously a temporary situation because they have other duties also. And we also looked at potentially some traffic control that may assist us. So we have options. It's just unfortunate where we're at this point right now. We definitely need, one in particular is Second and Maria. That's where this individual was working that has resigned. So.
Have you talked?
Yes, sorry.
Go ahead.
Chief, just to clarify, the newbie here, this is a state mandate for these crossing guards, or is this a?
Well, no, it's not. It's obviously a function that we've worked in partnership with the school district, and there, I believe, an expectation, obviously, from our community. Again, I mean, even the past, it's one thing to have an officer, possibly working that area fill in if it's a last-second thing, but we obviously, that's a finite resource in and of itself. We can't have officers covering these intersections, and we'll find a solution.
That's all reasonable. I was just curious. I wasn't sure. So, thank you.
Has there been any consideration talking to Public Works about making that a 4-way stop at Second and Maria?
I had a conversation with the mayor on that topic, and I know briefly with Scott Badun, I think he was going to reach out. You don't want to say that's a solution, but it would certainly help. And there's other issues that come into that intersection too, where a 4-way stop would be appropriate. But, if push come to shove, at least we have some traffic control there and that's an elementary school, obviously, Madison School. Right. Where that could offer some assistance. But another place, we have traffic control right now. Mary Boris, longtime school crossing, is at Jefferson and Division Street. I mean, that has a traffic control, but still with the amount of traffic that we're dealing with and the potentials that come into play, we're still gonna want a crossing guard there. But yes, that was one of the topics that I did have a conversation with the mayor with.
That would be a good thing to bring up at Public Works, Mary. That would be a good thing to bring up at Public Works one of these times.
Chief, how many areas do we need crossing guards for? Or how many do we use, how many do we normally have staffed?
I'm gonna let Mary grab that and I'll come right back.
Let's see, for the record, Mary Kneebone, 5718 Sandpiper Drive. When we lived in Dallas, they used a flashing light system and it timed from like 7:15 when the thing flashed. It was 15 miles an hour. And 2:30 to 3:45, whatever, by every public school in the city. And right around the first part of the school year, there was a lot of heavy enforcement, and people really respected those school zones. Amazingly so, because drivers in Dallas generally don't respect many traffic laws, but pretty hefty fines and some early enforcement, and people got the message that when that light flashed, and that's something that we maybe could do down the line. If you think something like that would work, you can set it up with with just a flashing yellow or a flashing red or, you know.
They do that down by Rice Street, don't they now?
Yeah, we have a couple locations that we have the flashing lights, and we do very heavy enforcement, and, well, not only that, you know, using Facebook and social media and local media, but we also have very heavy enforcement at the beginning of the year, that if you go through, you'll see them, but.
People got real good at timing their commutes
Yes.
to avoid when the school zone times would kick in,
Yep.
including myself in the afternoon.
Yep.
But it was something that I looked into when I first got elected, but it doesn't seem to be an issue, but now it's starting to be a problem. So time now to maybe look at some things that are working in other places. So, you know, definitely get a lot of support, I'm sure, for public safety. So anyway.
And Joe Johnson's actually working, Wausau is the one that uses this private vendor. It sounds like he's got some numbers and potentially, I don't know, it seems a little odd working through a private vendor for something like this, but we'll see how that goes. Wausau has no issues with it. Sorry, Bob, though, you had some.
Yeah, I was just wondering, how many different sites do we normally man, and how many are we low right now?
We're down to, I believe, 4. And at one point, we were at 9?
8 or
8.
9?
And several of these we're able to either consolidate. We have a contingency on 2, which I don't want to do. Combining one on Michigan Avenue to have Michigan and Heffron and Michigan and Rice create one crossing through there, but you're looking at, I think that's like a 4-block stretch, and I just would rather not, and those are significantly used crossings, so again, I don't want to come to hard decisions like that. Hopefully we can come up with some equations before we get there.
Well, and as I've been watching some of this around town too, while the schools don't change, neighborhoods change.
Yes.
And what used to have 100 kids in it now has 3. Meanwhile, some other neighborhood has gone from 3 to 100, you know.
Right.
But the schools are still, so that gives you an additional problem of where do we put them?
Right.
So I could also see why people really don't jump at this job because of the inconvenience of timing. I mean, you gotta agree to be there in the morning, then back at afternoon.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, different world and different things. I would have grabbed it in high school or, but we'll see how it plays out. I just had a couple calls I wanted to just point out really quick. And some of these made some headlines. So we did have a traffic stop. Again, we're seeing vehicle pursuits pop up on the screen again. This one received some coverage. Officer attempted to make a traffic stop. Vehicle didn't stop for a stoplight. It took off. We terminated, which is something that we want officers to be cognizant of. We're not going to sit here and say, well, you know, you do a traffic law, traffic violation, we're not going to pursue, but you need to be very cognizant of your surroundings, and the officer terminated. They came across the vehicle short time after that again, and the vehicle took off once again, and the officer terminated. Then as officers, and normally in that case, we'll keep an eye in the neighborhood if we come across it. That vehicle was found on a dead end behind Kent's Towing, actually in the area where we're talking about. And the officer turned on his lights, got out of the car and started walking up. The vehicle started up and took off, and in this time actually hit the officer. The mirror caught him, and at that point, it's, I guess, game on. The pursuit, we ended up utilizing a pit maneuver, and that's where we actually make contact with our squad into their vehicle at safe speeds. And we were able to apprehend a 17-year-old high school kid who was on mushrooms, amongst other things. We did have some damage done to the squad, and Lisa has called and told me about, I want to say a bit over $6,000. But unfortunately, and we're looking at some, obviously a young kid. Another one also turned into being a pursuit. We received a call of a complaint of a female in one of our parks being held against her will by a crossbow. That ended up becoming a bit of an uncooperative victim, but ultimately that is what got us responding to that call. Again, that we caught the suspect as he was leaving the park and we gave pursuit. And the vehicle we had, I believe, was going over 60 miles an hour through some stop signs in a heavily residential neighborhood. We terminated that. But later came across, we received a complaint on the west side and came across the vehicle abandoned, and we were able to secure the crossbow amongst some other items. We have an ongoing investigation, so I don't want to get too far into that. And later that day, we did apprehend the suspect. So of those, and as Joe had talked about, we did have 7 use of force incidents this past month. And just touch briefly on training, Assistant Chief Bob Cousseau is attending his command college 1 week a month. He travels down there, and for those that do not know, he lost both his parents here in this past week, separately, 6 days apart. He's had a rough week, but he is still going to be down at the school, and he's doing good. Lead Officer Robert Roser, one of our DAT instructors, works with Joe, has attended a training called Legally Justifiable but Avoidable. That's part of our expanding our training cadre to cover more of the de-escalation training, and he's gone down there. I'm done with my report, and I cleared it with the president. I'm going to go a little bit off script here. As we all know, somebody's last day is today. You hear a term said often, I got your back, or military, I got your six. So what does that mean? And that's something, obviously, I've experienced, good or bad. I'm there for you. And I think of a statement made by the late President John F. Kennedy. Success has 1,000 fathers. Failure is an orphan. And that is something that I have experienced firsthand and in public safety. And normally it usually comes after an incident and the media comes calling. And if things went well, you had a whole lot of hands up in the air saying, hey, look at me, this is what I did. When it doesn't go so well, you don't have a hard time getting to the mic. And I've learned that early in my career, which the picture on the back of this is for. That was a press conference, and he knows about it. Chief Finn standing by my side, as he does. I got your back, good or bad. I'll be there. So, as we knew, he was going to be leaving in December, and things changed, but we had a fire call downtown, the high-rise, and significant event, joint event, obviously with fire, and we needed to relocate several people. And as true as the sun will come up in the morning, things were wrapping up. You looked in the corner, and in come the media. And the chief, I was standing by him, and he's like, well, boys and gals, this is it. This is my last news conference. So normally I'd be taking my side next to him, but I thought I'd take my shot at photojournalism, and I sent Assistant Chief Mike Rotier up to him, and that is a picture of Chief Bob Finn in all of his garb doing your last press conference as a Stevens Point Fire Chief. It's been an honor to work with you. and knowing that you always had my back. Thank you very much.
There's that goofy look on my face. Thank you.
You bet. That was off script, so hopefully I made sense out of that one, but.
All impromptu, very well done. And that was the chief's report.
Just one question for you, Chief.
Yes.
Who determines termination of a pursuit? The officer himself, or does he call in for?
Any one part of that pursuit can call that off. Obviously, we actually train officers when we're doing pursuit. We actually train them, terminate, because some of the hardest things you have is kind of like a bird dog, try to get it off the scent. When an officer's engaged, there's that drive to, and depending on the severity of the call, which is why every, and this is by policy too, every pursuit is, we have to have a supervisor actively engaged, asking questions. I mean, we train officers, give out speeds, give out locations, what's the traffic, what's the weather. And in many cases, because of the intensity, you will have a secondary officer come in that will take over communications. So the officer can focus on driving that squad. All of this is overseen by the shift supervisor that's working. And at any point, that shift supervisor can obviously step in and say, you terminate, and we've had that. But anyone in that step that's actively involved in that chase can terminate that. And it's a no question. You're not going to be asked questions afterwards as to why you would terminate. It is, in particular, that officer. You operate to your skill level, and obviously the community safety is, number one concern, obviously.
Thank you. I knew a lot of that from being on this commission, but I wanted it for the public record, because I think there's a gross misunderstanding sometimes out in the community. Well, why did he stop? Why didn't he keep going? Why didn't he round, that type of thing. And I want the community to know that it's all done based on a professional evaluation, and that no one person is making this shot. It's an actual trained position.
I would add on that, and this is something I was involved in early in my assistant chief career, no different than we've done the use of force, which actually, these pursuits and the tactics that, in this case, we did a pit maneuver. It's a pursuit intervention tactic, that's use of force. But every pursuit that we're involved in, whether it's terminated or completed, is reviewed by our master emergency vehicle operations instructor, who gets those, and they go through, we have squad cameras and reports, and all of that is reviewed either by the master instructor or sent off to one of our other emergency vehicle instructors. And if there's any questions, and some cases we have where we would hope they would have terminated early, or a different tactic may have been more appropriate. Good or bad, we're going to review that on an in-service. Those videos get put up there, and it's a training tool, and it's better than the YouTube videos where you're watching somebody in a chase from down in Georgia. That's where you get a lot of the chases, but it's your
We're kind of proud of that.
it's your fellow officer that you're working on the shift, and I find it to be very productive, because it's somebody it's streets that you're seeing that action, and it's not a pride thing. We can learn from each other if it's bad, or in the case that it's good. So, but all of those are reviewed.
Thank you, Chief.
Very good. I'll make a motion to accept the chief's report and place it on file.
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Ostrowski. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Well, item number 7. See, it's your last day and we almost skipped you already.
It's okay.
How soon they forget.
It's okay.
Fire chief's report.
It's gonna be kind of hard to follow your report since I don't have a report.
That's a report.
I believe that you got January's report that it was sent to Leanna. Did you send that out after the last PFC meeting? With this being March 1st, you can't give February's report, so Chief Moody will give February and March's report in April. There are a few things I'd like to report, though, is that some things that have happened in the last month. We had Lieutenant Zander, who took our intern, Luke Fornes, Medic 2 with Connor Piloff, Dustin Fleischner, and Plover Church responders, and they delivered a baby a couple weeks ago. So that's a good thing. About a year ago, I was brought up on Captain Hebler doing CPR at the airport off duty. Well, we had another member who was out and about in the city and eating dinner, and someone was choking. Jason Pettis performed a Heimlich maneuver and saved the victim's life. They spit up the object, and everything was okay. So, just to show you that the men and women are never really off duty. Other than that, this being my last meeting, if it's all right, President Moore, if I have a few things to say.
Go for it.
It's a bittersweet day. I don't know how I'm gonna get through this one, but the one at 1:30 is even be tougher. First of all, I want to thank the citizens of Stevens Point. It's been an honor and privilege to serve this community for the last 14 and a half years. This is a very caring community. Whether for the fire department, MDA, Ring the Bell Challenge, the fire department won a lot of them Ring the Bell challenges. It's a very, it's truly been an honor and a privilege to serve. I'd like to thank past and present city councils. Especially like to thank Mayor Halverson. He was the first mayor when I got this job, and I was trying to navigate my way around the difference between 6213 and City Hall and stuff like that. And Mayor Halverson and I always didn't agree. I know that's hard to believe the first 6 months, but the one thing I truly appreciated, that when I left his office, I knew he had my back and he had the fire department's back. I want to thank Alder Mary Nebo. The police and fire departments could not ask for a better liaison, a true champion for police and fire departments. And what you bring to the city council for us is greatly appreciated by me and Chief Center, because we've talked. There's a lot of people at City Hall, that's saying it takes a village. It does. Lisa at HR, Corey, the treasurer. Corey's not here, but this is on the record. All I ask is that Corey let Joe drive his vet before Joe retires. His staff, Carrie, Sue, Kristen, Sarah, Carrie Enter, for all her work she does in swearing in our people. Other department heads, Joel Scott with our training site, Dan Kramer also helped with the training site. I met Dan at Riverfront, his first weekend here, and we wound up shutting down Riverfront because of a tornado warning. That's how Dan and I got to know each other, and since then, we have worked together very closely, and we've become friends. Dan is a true friend. I'd like to thank past and present members of the PFC. It's been a rough 3 years, the last 3 years, for both police and fire. And when Tom says we stood by each other's side, Tom is the one guy in the city that knew what I was going through at them times, and I was the one guy that I knew what Tom was going through at his times, and we talked weekly. And Tom is a true friend and a true leader, and I greatly appreciate your support. I'm going to miss them weekly talks. But the one member of the Police and Fire Commission I was lucky to have was my liaison, Joe Kirschling. Joe and I talk weekly on updates of the fire department, and in the beginning, it was just that, fire department stuff. Over the last 7.5 years, Joe has talked me down a little bit at times. But I could always be honest and truthful with him, and he understood it. And that's another guy that has become a friend, not a work acquaintance, but a true friend. I have to give 2 speeches today, so some of them are going to cross over. I want to thank the Stevens Point Police Department and law enforcement. When I first made chief, I don't think we trained very much together. And now we train RTF, fire investigations, warrants. But I think the citizens of Stevens Point should know that Stevens Point Police Department, I've worked with a lot of police departments. This is a top-notch police department. From their patrol officers, and I worked closely with IB when I first started through fire investigations. And I believe they've arrested 8 to 10 people in the last 12 years on arson charges, which is unheard of. To get that kind of evidence and bring them kind of charges. But the citizens should know that they serve with honor and commitment every day out there. And they don't get the recognition they truly deserve. To the men and women of the Stevens Point Fire Department, again, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve with you. Our mission statement is Stevens Point Fire Department exists to serve in a professional and friendly manner with a dedicated and dependable team. One team, one goal, one difference at a time. I'm here to tell you they make a difference at every call they go on because people are calling us in the worst day of their lives. And the members, men and women of Stevens Point Fire Department do it in a professional, respectful, integrity, compassionate, with excellence, price. If you come into the firehouse, that is on our wall, and they truly believe this. I'm going to talk more about the fire department and the assistant chiefs at a later time. I have talked to President Moore and Commissioner Kirschling about an exit interview. We couldn't make it happen today. Whatever President Moore decides, I'll be more than willing to come back and speak to whoever, whenever. I'd be more than willing to do that. I think there's some things that members of the Police and Fire Commission should hear, but only hear in closed session. And then I'm just going to again say it's been an honor and a privilege serving this community and working with the people I have for the last 14.5 years. Today is going to end 45.5 years in the fire service. You know, what's the saying? You get a job you like, you never have to work a day in your life. Well, I've been very fortunate in places I've worked, the communities I've worked in, and it is a bittersweet day. But I am looking forward to spending time with my family and my grandchildren. And thanks again. That's it. That's my report.
I like it. We'll make a
And
motion.
my last meeting, Commissioner Ostrowski did not ask one question on the bills. It's got to be the first time in 7.5 years. He didn't have a question on the bills.
I think it is. I think it is.
I'll make a motion to accept the report and place it on file.
Second.
Would happily second that.
We have a second by Commissioner Taylor. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Agenda number 8 is the President's report. I really don't have much to say today. It's been an hour's worth of meeting. The one comment I do have is reaching out to Mr. Bob Cuso and his family and offering condolences for everything that he's going through right now. Other than that, that's it. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Hey, Bob.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.